The cold fluorescent light spilled across the empty intensive care corridor while my biological father physically blocked my path. My name is Cassandra. I am 32 years old, working professionally as a forensic accountant who spends every day uncovering concealed corporate realities. Don't go see her. My biological father snapped harshly while aggressively shoving me away from the frosted glass hospital door. Standing right behind his broad shoulders, his new wife stared at me with pure disdain radiating from her eyes. "Your mother is completely toxic. She never actually loved you at all," my stepmother added with a chilling lack of empathy. I was violently forced to bite my lip in absolute frustration while walking away from the fading heartbeat echoing from the monitors. The feeling of total helplessness consumed me entirely because I could do absolutely nothing to force my way inside that room. The very next afternoon, following her quiet funeral service, a mysterious man wearing a dark tailored suit approached me silently in the parking lot. He identified himself as her private lawyer before handing me a heavy envelope sealed perfectly with thick red wax. He looked me directly in the eyes, stating clearly that this package contained her ultimate final wish meant only for me. The very first line written inside that heavy letter completely exposed a massive financial lie I had blindly believed for 16 long years. Before I reveal the devastating secret that ultimately helped me destroy their entire lives, please take a quick moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Drop a comment below, telling me your current age along with where you are watching from today, because I always read every single response. The thick wax seal on the envelope broke with a dry snap, tearing through the absolute silence inside my car cabin. The mysterious man standing outside my driver's side window introduced himself professionally as my mother's private lawyer, Arthur. He spoke with a deeply serious tone, affirming that this heavy parchment was her ultimate final testament, which she explicitly requested I open in complete privacy. I held the cream-colored stationery carefully while processing the overwhelming reality that my mother had been planning this specific moment long before her heart finally stopped beating in that intensive care unit. Arthur remained standing quietly in the damp parking lot while I unfolded the thick pages to read the very words my family had desperately tried to keep away from me. The letter did not immediately unveil every single detail of her hidden financial empire or overwhelm me with complex legal instructions. It instead began by dismantling the painful narrative I had been forced to swallow for over 16 years. "He forced me to leave, but I never stopped protecting you." The very first line of my mother's letter stated in her unmistakable cursive handwriting. The ink detailed how my biological father Richard had ruthlessly exploited legal custody loopholes to threaten her into total isolation. He gave her an agonizing ultimatum requiring her to step away completely so he could maintain absolute control over my daily life. I realized then that her absence was never an act of abandonment, but rather a calculated sacrifice designed solely to shield me from his manipulative wrath. Reading further down the page revealed that she had spent those isolated years meticulously building something massive in the technology sector without ever drawing unwanted attention to her success. However, she deliberately kept the exact details of her wealth vague within these pages to prevent anyone from intercepting the absolute truth. She concluded her final message with a cryptic warning meant to prepare me for the upcoming war. "Remember this carefully. Everything I leave behind is absolutely not where they are currently looking," my mother emphasized clearly at the very bottom of the page. That single sentence shifted the entire situation from a simple tragic loss into a highly strategic battle for her true legacy. I lowered the letter slowly while Arthur leaned closer to the window to deliver a crucial piece of intelligence he had gathered from the probate courts. He informed me that Richard, along with his new family, were already frantically mobilizing to secure her standard bank accounts while attempting to clear out her known safe deposit boxes. They were rushing to execute this financial raid right now, even though the official death certificate had not yet been formally issued by the state authorities. Their greedy desperation completely exposed their true motives because they were terrified of losing their primary source of unearned income. The scattered pieces of this massive financial puzzle finally locked together perfectly inside my analytical mind. I understood completely that the vicious insults along with the aggressive hospital blockade orchestrated by Richard were nothing more than a desperate smokescreen to cover up a monumental financial theft. They truly believed I was just an ignorant, grieving daughter who would simply walk away out of pure emotional exhaustion. They failed to realize that pushing me away only sharpened my professional instincts as a forensic accountant trained to find hidden discrepancies. I meticulously folded the letter back into the envelope before making the firm decision to walk directly into the lion's den. I needed to attend their upcoming family meeting to uncover exactly what kind of legal trap they were trying to set for me. At exactly 10 o'clock on Thursday morning, I walked directly into the living room of Richard's house to attend a scheduled meeting regarding funeral expenses. Sitting at the head of the heavy oak dining table was my stepbrother named Derek, who currently works as a high-level wealth management director. He had clearly positioned himself to take complete control over this negotiation session on behalf of both Richard and Sharon. They sat silently in the background, allowing him to orchestrate whatever legal trap they had spent the last 2 days meticulously preparing for my arrival. I took the seat opposite of him, while maintaining a calculated professional posture to ensure they understood I was not there to grieve with them. Without offering any polite condolences, Derek immediately pushed a thick stack of stapled documents across the polished wooden surface toward my seat. He maintained a perfectly practiced corporate smile while explaining that these were simply the final medical billing forms required by the hospital administration. These are just standard medical payment forms. Sign them so we can finally settle her outstanding debts. Derek spoke rapidly while tapping his fingers impatiently on the table. He produced an expensive silver pen from his jacket pocket and placed it deliberately right next to the signature line, hoping I would just blindly comply out of sheer emotional exhaustion. He expected me to be a broken daughter desperate to resolve the administrative nightmare of losing a parent. He entirely underestimated the fact that my daily professional life revolves around dissecting fraudulent paperwork to expose hidden corporate liabilities. Utilizing my sharp instincts as a forensic accountant, I ignored his rushing tactics and began flipping through the dense pages of boilerplate text. Buried deep within the 4th paragraph of the 2nd page was a highly sophisticated hidden clause, completely unrelated to any standard hospital billing procedures. This specific paragraph was cleverly disguised legal jargon designed specifically to force the signatory into permanently waiving all future rights to contest the distribution of my mother's entire estate. If the ink from my pen touched that specific dotted line, I would legally surrender every single asset she had secretly built in Austin. I kept my facial expression completely devoid of any emotion while processing the sheer audacity of their attempted financial theft. I calmly placed the silver pen back down onto the wood before pushing the entire stack of papers right back across the table toward his chest. I do not have a habit of signing legal documents before having my lawyer review them, I replied with a perfectly even tone. I made absolutely sure to keep my eyes locked onto his face without giving any indication that I had already discovered the devastating hidden waiver buried within his fabricated medical forms. I knew that exposing my knowledge too early would only give them the opportunity to draft a much stronger legal trap. The fake corporate smile vanished from Derek's face instantly as his carefully constructed plan collapsed right in front of his silent parents. His entire demeanor shifted from dismissive arrogance into barely contained fury because he was not accustomed to facing resistance from someone he considered inferior. He leaned forward aggressively across the table while dropping his voice into a low, menacing register designed to intimidate me into immediate submission. He explicitly warned me that causing unnecessary delays in their procedural timeline would result in a very heavy personal price for me to pay. He strongly implied that choosing to fight them would mysteriously threaten my current professional livelihood. I picked up my purse without offering any counter-argument and walked straight out the front door. At exactly 8 o'clock on Friday morning, my system access privileges at the corporate accounting office were abruptly completely disabled. The Human Resources Director immediately summoned me into a secure conference room to formally notify me of my sudden termination due to a highly severe anonymous security complaint regarding client data protocols. It was incredibly obvious that this was a direct retaliatory strike orchestrated by Derek to sever my primary financial lifeline before the probate proceedings could officially begin. He intended to drain my personal resources completely, so I would be unable to afford a protracted legal battle over the upcoming estate disputes. I surrendered my corporate security badge without offering any defensive arguments because fighting a fabricated administrative complaint would only waste the valuable time I desperately needed to construct my actual forensic case. Instead of returning to my apartment in defeat, I drove directly to the downtown office of my representative lawyer Vivian to immediately initiate our aggressive counterattack against his fraudulent maneuvering. We bypassed any useless emotional discussions to focus entirely on meticulously tracing the recent transaction history associated with the suspicious medical billing records Derek had presented to me the day before. Vivian utilized her specialized legal access portals to pull the specific routing numbers attached to the hospital payment clearinghouse. The complex digital financial ledger revealed that a completely unknown shell company registered remotely in Austin had already paid the massive intensive care unit invoices in full without any prior family authorization. They used a ghost corporation to pay the medical bills up front to establish a legitimate legal standing to intervene in the trust assets, Vivian stated, while pointing her finger firmly at the glowing computer monitor. They were calculatingly utilizing these settled debts as a Trojan horse to justify their immediate administrative access to her private financial accounts before the local probate courts could officially intervene. This aggressive financial maneuver clearly proved that Derek was extremely desperate to secure the technology assets rapidly before anyone could start asking appropriate legal questions. We dug much deeper into the county commercial registry database to uncover the true extent of their fraudulent corporate architecture involving the various technology holdings. Our extensive digital search eventually yielded a highly suspicious electronic trust transfer document filed just moments before my mother actually passed away in the hospital ward. This specific digital file utilized an advanced electronic signature registered under my mother's name, which was specifically formatted to legally transfer ownership of her entire technology investment portfolio directly over to Derek's newly formed holding company. He clearly believed that utilizing a modern electronic signature protocol from a remote server would bypass the traditional verification scrutiny usually applied to handwritten ink documents during standard estate audits. I pulled out the certified medical logs Vivian had previously acquired from the hospital administration, using an older medical proxy document to carefully cross-reference the exact execution times. The digital timestamp definitively stamped on the electronic transfer filing clearly showed the remote signature was successfully authenticated at precisely 10 o'clock in the morning on that specific Tuesday. I traced my index finger slowly across the official hospital charts, which meticulously detailed the exact dosage times for her heavy intravenous sedative medications. And this transfer document was signed at 10 in the morning while my mother was already in a deep medically induced coma. Since the previous night, I concluded coldly while looking at the undeniable proof resting on the desk. A critical care patient relying entirely on a mechanical ventilator to maintain basic breathing functions cannot physically operate a tablet device to execute a complex digital wealth transfer. We now securely possessed the exact irrefutable technical evidence required to completely dismantle his arrogant financial theft forever. At exactly 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon, Vivian submitted an emergency asset freeze injunction to the county court right before the system closed for the weekend. The stringent blockade took effect almost immediately across all financial institutions operating within the jurisdiction. Derek, along with Richard, found themselves completely incapable of intervening in the corporate accounts or liquidating any valuable patent portfolios they desperately needed to secure their stolen wealth. Their carefully constructed pipeline for siphoning off the investments was abruptly choked off without any prior warning, leaving them financially stranded. The swiftness of the court order meant that their access to the primary wealth management portals was immediately revoked by the corporate banking servers. Rather than resorting to messy emotional outbursts or launching a predictable smear campaign across public social media platforms, Sharon executed a much more calculated retaliation strategy. A specialized courier arrived at my apartment early the following morning to deliver a highly aggressive legal warning letter drafted with exceptionally sharp, threatening language. She clearly intended to utilize intimidation tactics through formal judicial threats, rather than fighting a public relations battle online, because she understood the sheer power of financial terror. The document was perfectly formatted on expensive law firm letterhead to maximize the psychological weight of her impending retaliation against my lifestyle. I opened the heavy envelope to read her vicious demands, which outlined a completely fabricated narrative accusing me of malicious interference in their legitimate family business. The legal notice explicitly stated her firm intention to officially initiate a massive civil lawsuit against me for severe defamation of their pristine family character. Furthermore, the document warned that her attorneys were actively preparing to file a counterpetition designed to freeze every single dollar inside my personal savings accounts to force my immediate unconditional surrender. This specific maneuver was a remarkably ruthless psychological blow, engineered precisely to corner me into total financial ruin before the main battle even began. Sharon knew perfectly well that surviving a protracted probate litigation requires substantial liquid capital to retain highly competent legal representation like Vivian. By threatening to sever my personal financial lifelines completely, she hoped I would simply collapse under the crushing anxiety of facing utter bankruptcy while dealing with my recent job termination. She expected me to call her in a state of sheer panic, begging for a peaceful resolution just to keep a roof over my head during this turbulent transition period. She is threatening to sue me for defamation while demanding the court freeze my personal bank accounts to cut off my litigation funding. I pushed the threatening letter aside across the polished desk. That is a desperate preemptive strike from someone who is clearly panicking right now, so we just need to maintain our absolute silence to let the court injunction choke them out. Vivian nodded in firm confirmation while reviewing the paperwork. Taking her professional advice to heart, I chose to implement a strategy of absolute silence against their vicious provocations. I steadfastly refused to draft reactionary emails or engage in defensive phone calls to dispute their entirely baseless legal warnings. By completely ignoring every single document they sent my way, I effectively deprived them of the escalating conflict they desperately needed to validate their fabricated victim status. I knew that engaging in a pointless shouting match would only give them the specific leverage they required to prove I was acting out of irrational spite. My profound lack of response functioned as an invisible psychological weapon that slowly suffocated their remaining confidence throughout the entire weekend. They were left entirely alone to struggle frantically within a suffocating liquidity deadlock while watching their stolen empire remain perfectly locked away behind an impenetrable judicial wall. The crushing reality of their frozen bank accounts forced them to face the terrifying truth that they were rapidly running out of ammunition. They possessed no additional liquid cash to pay their expensive retaining fees, because every single dime they relied upon was now securely trapped by Vivian's flawless legal filing. At 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning the following week, the characteristically cold atmosphere of the county probate mediation room entirely enveloped us. Derek strolled into the sterile conference space carrying a highly arrogant demeanor, perfectly suited for a victorious corporate executive attending a mere formality. He firmly believed the aggressive defamation lawsuit threat sent recently by his mother had successfully shattered my remaining willpower to fight their fraudulent legal maneuverings. He confidently assumed my absolute silence over the past few days indicated a total psychological collapse. Taking his designated seat directly across the heavy mahogany table, he smirked slightly while preparing his documents. He fully expected me to accept a pathetic financial settlement designed merely to humiliate me further before the actual trial dates could ever be officially scheduled. Instead of launching into a furious argument regarding the stolen technology portfolio, I calculatingly adopted the vulnerable persona of someone deeply confused by complex estate laws. I projected a fabricated sense of overwhelming anxiety while intentionally keeping my physical posture defensive to encourage his inherently narcissistic need to dominate the legal conversation. Vivian remained perfectly quiet beside me, acting the part of an outmatched attorney failing to control her frightened client. This orchestrated vulnerability was a vital tactical necessity required to bait him into speaking freely on the official record. I looked up at him nervously, pretending to struggle with the basic technical realities surrounding digital asset transfers to lower his defensive barriers completely. I was just so overwhelmed at the time. Can you remember exactly what my mother looked like when she personally pressed the button to confirm her digital signature? I asked, utilizing a deliberately timid voice. She was completely awake. I stood right next to her bed and saw her hold the tablet to press confirm with my own eyes. Derek answered smugly, stepping directly into the trap. Intoxicated by my fabricated submission, he continued speaking extensively into the official court recording device, resting clearly in the middle of the negotiation table. He arrogantly detailed an elaborate fabricated narrative about visiting the intensive care unit that specific morning to assist her with finalizing her ultimate financial wishes. He wove a vivid lie describing how my mother sat up against her hospital pillows with her eyes wide open while eagerly reviewing the digital transfer documents on her personal electronic tablet. He explicitly swore, under the severe penalty of perjury, that she physically utilized her own finger to authenticate the electronic signature protocol without any external assistance whatsoever. Every single word spilling from his mouth violently contradicted the certified medical charts securely locked inside Vivian's leather briefcase resting right next to my feet. He was painting a masterpiece of undeniable fraud while proudly handing us the exact legal weapon required to destroy his entire career. He remained so entirely focused on securing his narrative dominance, he completely ignored the quiet, clicking sounds coming from the official court reporter, immortalizing his disastrous testimony. He had just formally declared his direct involvement in generating a forged electronic signature while asserting the physical competency of a patient currently residing in a deep, medically induced coma. The very second the official clerk finalized stamping his sworn statements into the permanent judicial ledger, my fragile demeanor evaporated instantly. Vivian and I simultaneously dropped our submissive posture while replacing it with an uncompromisingly fierce attitude that caught him completely off guard. We abruptly snapped our briefcases shut, while loudly declaring to the neutral mediator that we officially rejected all settlement offers immediately. Leaving Derek sitting completely frozen in sheer confusion, we turned our backs and walked straight out the heavy wooden door without offering him a single backward glance. At exactly 10 o'clock on Friday morning, the evidentiary hearing officially commenced under the piercing gaze of the strict presiding judge. Derek's highly paid legal representative stood up confidently to submit the comprehensive electronic transfer portfolio directly into the official court record. His attorney blindly clung to the blatantly perjured testimony established during our Tuesday mediation session, hoping to secure a rapid judicial victory before we could mount any proper defense. The opposition clearly believed their fabricated digital paperwork was entirely impenetrable because they had severely underestimated our meticulous forensic preparation over the past few weeks. They proudly presented the fabricated digital certificates, assuming the presiding magistrate would simply rubber stamp the massive asset transfer without looking deeply into the underlying technological metadata required for legal validation. Vivian waited calmly for their arrogant presentation to conclude before launching our devastating counterattack without displaying a single ounce of hesitation. She systematically cross-submitted the certified medical charts, proving conclusively that my mother remained trapped inside a deep, medically induced coma during the exact moment the digital authorization occurred. To completely obliterate their remaining legal defense, Vivian also presented a certified cybersecurity report tracing the specific IP address used to generate the electronic signature. The undeniable technical data traced the network connection straight back to a private desktop computer located firmly inside Derek's corporate wealth management firm rather than the secure hospital ward. The stark contrast between the intensive care medical realities alongside the irrefutable technological footprint instantly crushed their entire web of deceit right in front of the silent courtroom. The presiding magistrate adjusted her reading glasses to scrutinize the overwhelming forensic evidence resting heavily upon her elevated mahogany bench. Her stern facial expression tightened with palpable disgust while she reached for her heavy wooden gavel to deliver the final ruling regarding the contested technology portfolio. This document is void. This trust was strictly established to exclusively belong to the direct blood heir, the judge declared forcefully while striking the gavel against the sounding block. Sitting quietly at the respondent table, a sudden choking wave of profound emotion swelled up inside my chest upon hearing those specific validating words. Hearing a legal authority explicitly confirm my rightful status as the blood heir made me finally realize the staggering magnitude of the protective barrier my mother had secretly built. She had spent 16 agonizing years enduring complete isolation just to ensure my financial future remained perfectly secure from their malicious greed. The emotional weight of her quiet sacrifice anchored my soul completely, while I watched the people who tormented us face their absolute destruction. Before the opposition could even attempt to withdraw their fraudulent filings, Vivian stood up tall to deliver the ultimate fatal strike against their crumbling empire. Your Honor, we formally request transferring the plaintiff's perjury record to the federal prosecutor's office to investigate criminal fraud, Vivian demanded boldly across the silent courtroom. The judge nodded in firm agreement before officially ordering the court clerk to forward the sworn mediation transcripts directly to the federal authorities for an immediate criminal indictment. Derek turned completely pale as the crushing reality of an impending federal prison sentence entirely paralyzed his cognitive functions, leaving him speechless. Sitting merely a few rows behind him in the public gallery, Richard alongside Sharon collapsed completely into their wooden spectator seats. Their arrogant psychological facades shattered instantly into a million irreparable pieces as they finally faced the absolute certainty of total financial ruin without possessing a single viable legal escape route. They had gambled their entire comfortable existence on a forged digital signature, but ultimately lost everything they valued because the undeniable truth always resides securely within the forensic data. Several months later, the extensive liquidation and asset reestablishment process in Austin finally concluded under the clear, crisp atmosphere of early November. The immediate aftermath of the evidentiary hearing brought swift and merciless consequences to the people who tried to steal my future. Derek was transferred directly into a high-security federal holding facility where he currently awaits a lengthy criminal trial for severe wire fraud and perjury. Richard, alongside Sharon, completely collapsed under the massive weight of their accumulating legal debts and completely unpaid civil penalties. They were ultimately forced to file for total bankruptcy before being formally evicted by local authorities from the luxurious estate they had unjustly occupied for over a decade. I absolutely refuse to offer them any financial leniency or emotional reconciliation, choosing instead to permanently sever all contact without a single ounce of regret. Rather than liquidating everything to completely erase the past, I made a very deliberate decision regarding the technology trust. I chose to retain a substantial portion of her core patent portfolio as a permanent professional legacy honoring her memory. I utilized the remaining liquid capital to officially establish my own independent forensic accounting firm, dedicated exclusively to assisting vulnerable victims of corporate financial exploitation. This new endeavor allowed me to channel my specific expertise into a highly meaningful daily purpose. Sitting quietly by the window inside my new peaceful home, I opened my mother's heavy envelope to read her final letter one last time. Tracing her cursive handwriting across the thick paper allowed me to deeply feel the profound silent love and monumental sacrifice she had kept successfully hidden for 16 agonizing years. Her brilliant strategic mind had successfully secured my total financial independence from beyond the grave. Facing the ruthless, endless greed of the very people sharing my direct bloodline taught me some incredibly sharp realities that I will absolutely never forget. This original narrative is officially produced by our channel to serve strictly educational purposes regarding absolute personal boundaries. We aim to convey a powerful message about handling severe familial crises, utilizing pure logic, maintaining absolute emotional control, and relying firmly upon legal frameworks. Evaluating these events objectively, Cassandra decisively protected her future by permanently severing all ties with her highly toxic relatives without any hesitation. She demonstrated remarkable professional restraint by choosing strategic silence over messy public arguments. Consequently, the antagonists suffered the inevitable devastating legal consequences, resulting directly from their own greedy decisions and arrogant mistakes. Here are the vital core lessons we must learn from this intense situation. The ultimate truth does not ever need to scream or shout to prove its definitive validity. It only requires careful protection through the sharpest and most profoundly silent strategic actions available. Sometimes permanently severing ties with a completely toxic family member is the absolute only viable method to preserve your own personal dignity and mental health. Blood relations should never ever excuse ongoing manipulative behavior. Possessing an endless, bottomless greed to ruthlessly exploit vulnerable people will eventually ignite a massive fire that completely burns the manipulator down to the ground without any mercy. We sincerely thank you for patiently listening to this intense journey, uncovering the truth until the very final minute. We deeply appreciate your continued support for our channel. If you were completely in Cassandra's position, how exactly would you have handled the final confrontation with your own toxic family? Please share your personal perspectives down in the comments section below, and do not forget to subscribe for more.